hadn't seen my parents in 4 years, not since the night I left their house in silence, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a piece of myself they'd tried to smother. But I knew we'd all show up for Grandpa's will. That was one thing they wouldn't ignore. Money. Especially not the kind of money Edwin Mathis had managed to guard over the years. But no one expected what came next. It was early March, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I stepped into the law office wearing a pair of black heels I hadn't touched in years. They pinched, but I didn't care. I wanted them to hear me coming. That sharp tap against the marble floor was all I had to remind myself I wasn't walking in as the same daughter who used to beg for their approval. I was walking in as someone they no longer recognized. The receptionist gave me a polite smile. "Conference room B," she said, like this was just any other family meeting. It wasn't. Inside, the room smelled like lemon polish and old secrets. Leather chairs, a long oak table, and 3 familiar faces pretending not to see me. My mother fiddled with the clasp on her pearl necklace. My father sat stiff, arms crossed like a man guarding something that wasn't even his. And my sister, Romy, looked like she was about to host a fashion show, sunglasses on her head, lip gloss fresh. Mr. Sheridan, our family's lawyer for decades, entered with a solemn nod and gestured for everyone to sit. As per the final wishes of Mr. Edwin Mathis, all immediate family members are present. I sat last, just like I always had, the forgotten daughter, the quiet one. The will reading began like any other, formal, dry, until Mr. Sheridan opened a thick folder and began distributing assets. "To Romelia Mathis," he began, "the cabin in Wyoming and the 1959 vintage guitar." Romy blinked. "Excuse me? That's all?" my mother whispered, her voice cracking under the gloss of her pearls. "To Lawrence and Denise Mathis," he continued, "the grandfather clock vinyl collection and a charitable donation of $10,000, made in your name." My father leaned forward. "Is this a joke?" Mr. Sheridan didn't even flinch. Then he looked at me. "To Thea Mathis," he said, voice level. "He leaves his entire financial estate, totaling $29,246,000. The silence in that room could have cut through glass. My parents were already on their feet, voices raised. "She hasn't spoken to us in years," my mother shouted. "She left the family." "She doesn't get to come back and take everything," my father growled. "She abandoned us." Mr. Sheridan remained calm. Mr. Mathis made the change in person. It was notarized. It was deliberate. That's when he pulled the envelope out from under the desk. Thick, wax-sealed, with Grandpa's old horse emblem stamped right in the middle. The one he carved himself when he was just a boy. I reached out, hands steady, and took it. Inside was a check and a note. "For the one who stayed silent and stayed strong. You were never forgotten. I saw everything." I didn't have time to read it again. My father lunged across the table, snatched the check. My mother ripped the note into pieces. Romy rolled her eyes and crossed her arms like I'd just ruined her brunch plans. And then, without hesitation, my father pulled a lighter from his coat pocket and lit the check on fire. "This is what you get," he said as the smoke curled up toward the ceiling. "We're even." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I watched it burn. But what they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was that what they set on fire wasn't the real check. That one had been wired to a separate trust weeks earlier, untouchable. Grandpa and I had planned it together. They thought I'd come back weak, but I came back prepared. When I stepped out of that law office, I didn't say a word. No dramatic exits, just the echo of my heels on the floor, louder than ever before. Outside, the wind hit me like a dare. I got in my car, pulled out the real folder Grandpa had given me 2 months before his death, and opened it. Inside was a note. Just one line. "Let them think they won." and that's when everything began. The bank wasn't far from the law office, but the drive felt like a lifetime. I pulled into the private lot of Atlas Trust and Holdings, a place so discreet it didn't even have a visible sign, just a brass plate by the door. Mr. Adams was already waiting. He didn't smile, didn't ask how I was, just nodded with a quiet dignity and led me through the secured elevator to the lower vault floor. It smelled faintly of cedar and cold air, a strange mix of antiseptic wealth and forgotten truths. At Vault 7, he turned the lock and said simply, "Take your time. I'll be just outside." Then he left me alone with the past. Inside the drawer was a fireproof box labeled with my name in Grandpa's handwriting. For a moment I just sat there staring at it. My fingertips hovered over the latch, heart thudding in my throat. Then, with a breath, I whispered the passphrase he'd told me over breakfast months ago. Trillium. The name of the flower I used to pick with him by the cabin in the spring. Inside there were 3 things: a check, a flash drive, and a thick stack of legal documents tied in a red ribbon. The check made me exhale sharply. It was real. A cashier's check for the full amount, $29 million, 0 cents. Signed in his old looping script. The weight of it was physical, emotional. This wasn't just inheritance. It was recognition, restoration, proof I wasn't forgotten. I untied the ribbon next. The legal file held 2 older wills, one from 8 years ago, another from 3. In both, my parents and Romy were the primary beneficiaries. Grandpa's notes were scribbled in the margins. "Felt wrong," one said. "Dana insisted." "Why?" another asked. And then, more recently, in firmer handwriting, "No more lies. Thea is the only one who stayed." The final will, my will, was typed cleanly and simply. Every asset, financial or otherwise, left in my name. It was dated 2 weeks before his final hospitalization. The last item, the flash drive, I didn't open until I was back in my car. I locked the doors, slid it into my laptop, and watched the screen flicker to life. There he was, Grandpa, sitting in his old armchair, flanked by dusty books and that green-shaded lamp I remembered from my childhood. He looked tired, but his voice was strong. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I'm gone. And I'm sorry I didn't get to tell you this in person. I wanted to, but I knew if I waited, they'd find a way to stop me." He took a breath, his hands folded in his lap. "They never understood you, not really. They wanted you to be quiet, obedient. They said you were difficult, but you were just strong. And they punished you for it. They froze you out, took your college fund, turned your room into storage before you even graduated." My throat tightened. I remembered that night, coming home early from college only to find my bed replaced with Ramie's yoga mats and a print of some minimalist quote that said, "Breathe, just breathe." "I watched it all," he continued. "I told myself maybe it would change. Maybe they'd see you for who you are. But they didn't. And I can't forgive myself for waiting so long." He leaned closer to the camera, eyes glassy but steady. "This money isn't a gift. It's a tool. Use it wisely. Use it to build. Use it to heal if you want to. But don't ever use it to earn their love. That love was supposed to be yours by right, not by ransom." He paused, then said one last thing. "Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sharpest blade." The screen went dark. I sat there in the car for a long time, not crying, not angry, just still, like my soul needed time to catch up to the truth it had always suspected but never dared to speak aloud. That night I drove back to my apartment. It was small, a rental, the kind of place they used to sneer at. I didn't care. It was mine. I placed the flash drive in the safe with the documents and wrapped the real check in the same scarf Grandpa gave me when I turned 10. It still smelled like cedar and mothballs. Then I slid everything to the back of the closet. Later, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, opened an old folder I hadn't touched in years, rejected college letters, early business ideas, half-formed dreams I'd shelved when they told me I was nothing without their approval. I found one memory rising like smoke. Christmas. Sophomore year. I'd come home early, hoping to surprise them. Instead, I walked into a house lit up with garlands and music, only to find not a single gift with my name on it. When I asked, Mom said, "We didn't know you'd be back. Rami said you'd probably be too busy being difficult." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just went to the car and whispered to myself, "Just get through it." And I did. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The next morning, I backed up every file onto a private drive. I printed hard copies, labeled them, and stored everything in a fireproof case I bought that day. The sense of peace that settled over me wasn't triumph. It was something quieter, like stepping into a house that finally feels like home, even if it's just in your own skin. Then, at 6:13 a.m., my phone rang. No caller ID. I almost ignored it, but something in me said, "Answer." "Hey, Thea?" Romi's voice was soft, almost childlike. "I know it's early. I was just thinking, maybe we could talk, just the two of us, like we used to." I didn't reply. She kept going. "Coffee? Your pick. Just talk, no pressure." She sounded so normal, so casual, like she hadn't watched a check burn to ash just to make a point. But I said yes anyway. Not for her. For me. 11 o'clock, Cornerstone Cafe. When I hung up, I deleted her number. Just in case. The Cornerstone Cafe hadn't changed in years. Same faded window panes, same slow jazz leaking through the speakers, same chipped mugs that used to hold our finals week stress. Rami was already there when I arrived, sitting in the exact booth we always used to take. She looked too polished for someone who'd tried to erase me. Baby pink sweater, makeup flawless, a smile too bright for 11 a.m. She breathed, as if my name still belonged on her lips. She half stood like she might hug me, then sat back down quickly when I did. I slid into the booth across from her, setting my bag down without a word. "It's been too long," she said, stirring her coffee despite it being nearly full. "Remember those all-nighters we pulled here? You with your color-coded notes, me panic-eating banana bread like it was an emergency ration." I gave her a single nod. She laughed, a little too loud. "You always had it together. Even when we were 21, you were already 40, in spirit. In a good way." I didn't respond. I let her fill the silence because I knew that's what she couldn't stand most. Silence that didn't beg to be broken. She shifted gears like she'd practiced. "Mom hasn't been sleeping, Dad barely talks. They're hurting. They feel like you cut them off without warning. Like you disappeared." I raised one eyebrow. Romi's voice cracked just slightly. "I mean, I get it. You felt left out. You were always the outsider, but disappearing like this? Ignoring us? It's cruel." I sipped my tea slowly. She leaned forward. "Even Grandpa used to say you were distant, that you held grudges too tightly." I met her gaze evenly. "Did he tell you that? Or did someone else tell you to say it?" Her smile twitched. "Barely. Look, I just want this family to stay intact." There it was, the plea. But it wasn't about love, it was about control. Then she said it. "That check, the one you let Dad burn, was it real?" I paused, set my cup down with care. "It was just a piece of paper." She blinked. "What?" "It's gone now." The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was charged. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Whatever this is, whatever game Grandpa left you, it doesn't have to get ugly," she said. "Mom's already talking about contesting the will." I stood, slipping my coat over my shoulders. She's welcome to try." Rami's lips parted, but no words came out. I walked out without another glance. Outside, the wind scraped against my coat like it was trying to pull me back, but I kept walking. Each step broke the rhythm of who I used to be. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Back at my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and stood in the kitchen, still wearing the sweater that now smelled of confrontation and cinnamon latte. I was reaching for the kettle when I saw it. Something taped to my door, just below the peephole. A plain white envelope, no name, no return address, just tight, slanted handwriting in pen that dragged on the paper like someone wrote it with shaking hands. I peeled it off, sat at the table, and opened it. The inside was one sheet of paper. No greeting, no sign-off, just a sentence that stopped the air in my lungs. What they burned wasn't the real check. Don't speak, just move wisely, look in box array at the security firm. You'll understand everything. I read it 3 times before my body moved. Whoever sent this knew what happened, and they were trying to help me. I reached for the drawer next to the stove and pulled out an old brass key. Grandpa had given it to me on my 18th birthday, wrapped in a monogrammed handkerchief, saying, "You'll need this someday, when you're ready to claim yourself." I'd kept it out of sentiment, thinking it opened nothing but nostalgia. Now it opened a door. The next morning, I called Langford Vault and Estate. I gave them the key number, box array 9, and my name. There was a pause. "This box is registered under your name, Ms. Mathis," the receptionist said. "You're listed as sole access. We can schedule you for 2 p.m. I arrived early. The woman at the front desk scanned my ID and the key, then led me down a hallway that smelled of lemon and legacy. She opened a paneled door to a narrow room, just one table, one chair, and a wall of drawers. Box 9 slid open with a click. Inside were 3 items. A certified cashier's check made out to me, again for $29 million, 0 cents. A sealed envelope marked in red wax with the same horse stamp, and a manila folder full of crisp papers. I opened the envelope first. A note in Grandpa's hand read, "If you're reading this, they've shown you who they really are. The money wasn't the real gift. The real gift is knowing who to trust when the fire starts. Keep your own counsel, and never let them make you small again." I didn't cry, but I felt something loosen in my chest, like a breath I'd been holding since childhood had finally exhaled. I placed the folder and check back in the safe, thanked the attendant with a nod, and walked out like nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. Later that evening, I sat down with a bowl of soup I didn't want. A rustling noise from the front door made me pause. I stood slowly, heart already racing. There, under the doormat, was another envelope. No tape this time. No note, just an empty hush from the street. But across the road, half shrouded in the glow of a streetlight, stood a woman. She wasn't moving, just watching. Beige coat, oversized sunglasses, and around her neck, a pale blue silk scarf with ivory trim and tiny initials embroidered at the corner. M.S. Marjorie Carroll. My mother. That scarf had disappeared 3 years ago. She'd said the laundry ruined it. But here, it was around the neck of someone who looked just enough like her to freeze me in place. She didn't wave, didn't blink. She simply watched me watching her. I turned, walked down the marble steps of the vault, and slipped through the cafe next door. I cut through the kitchen, exited out the back, looped around the alley, then down 2 side streets. When I finally looked back toward the vault, she was gone. No scarf, no beige jacket, no shadow, but I knew what I saw. And I knew this wasn't over. Let me know if you'd like a thumbnail description or adaptation summary.